Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. So happy you could join us again today. We have Josh Bilbao from Jackson County Soil and Water doing a repeat for the holiday weekend. Great episode. We always learn lots from our friends at Jackson County Soil and Water Conservation District. So it's going to be a great show. In the meantime, let's jump into our local statistics because things are changing. We've got some good news coming up. Let's start with Jackson County. Jackson County prices year over year this week are neutral. We didn't have a gain or a loss. The average single family residential home is now costing on average $507,802 in Jackson County this week, year over year. Number of solds year over year in Jackson County are up 7%. Yay. And we've got 30 residential sales in Jackson County this week to report. The number of listings year over year are still down. They're down 9%. We had 682 residential listings on the market in Jackson County this week. Josephine County prices are up 15%. Congratulations, Josephine County. Average single family residential home costing $499,230,000 this week. Number of sold year over year in Josephine County were neutral. So same as Jackson County, we had 10 residential sales in Josephine County this week. Number of listings year over year in Josephine County are down 6%. We had 343 residential homes on the market in Josephine County this week. Klamath County was up 27%. Congratulations in prices. That's great. Year over year, the average single family residential home in Klamath County costing $309,273 this week. The number of solds in Klamath County year over year are up 22%. Yay. Congratulations, Klamath County. We had 11 residential sales in Klamath County this week. Number of listings in Klamath County are also up 9% year over year this week. We had 259 residential homes on the market in Klamath County this week. So it really does look like we've bottomed out. It does look like we're on the upswing, but that's why we check these numbers every week. So let's take a quick break from our sponsors and welcome in Josh Bilbao, Jackson County Soil and Water Conservation District. He's going to talk about water. He's going to talk about soil. He's going to talk about property and how to get a hold of them to help you with your home. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show. So glad you could join us today. I am so happy to have somebody from Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, one of our favorite agencies here in Southern Oregon. We're going to be talking to Josh Bilbao. He is agricultural research conservationist. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yes. Quite a mouthful. Well,
yes,
we just love having you folks on, and this is a great time of year to be talking about soil and water conservation because the season is changing. But Josh, before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about you, how you became an agricultural conservationist, and just what does Jackson Soil and Water Conservation do?
Yeah, of course. I came out here recently from Montana. I graduated from Montana State University. I have a undergraduate degree in wildlife management, and then I have a master's degree in range science. And kind of the brief introduction to range science is, everything that's not forested is range, right?
So let's talk about that at the end. That's very cool.
Of course, yeah. So before coming on with Jackson Soil and Water, I was working with Extension in Montana. So working with a lot of landowners on, any topic under the sun that was agricultural or horticultural or natural resource related. So I got a lot of experience working with different folks on that, and had the opportunity to come out to Southern Oregon this spring and take this job with Jackson Soil and Water. And I'm super excited with how it's gone so far, and just really enjoy working with this new environment that I'm in.
Yeah. And isn't this an amazing little spot in the world?
Oh my goodness. I had no idea. I had no idea how wonderful it was out here.
Yeah. We tried to keep it a secret, but not so easy.
Secret sound, I guess. Huh?
Yeah. So how did you decide to become a scientist?
That's a great question. Like I said, I grew up in Montana. And so there's a lot of, the one of the big key pieces of Montana just is its beauty, its scenery, and how open and kind of wild it still is, right? And that intermix between wild and agriculture is really strong in Montana. There's a lot of cattle production, there's a lot of small grains production up there, but the rest of it's grizzly bears and wolves and everything between running around up there. So I always love being outdoors and being immersed in the scenery that was there, and kind of just had that inquisitive mind of how things work and why is this and why is that. It's kind of led me down that path to pursue degrees in the kind of wildlife and agricultural background. So.
Oh, that's fabulous. Fabulous. And you studied hard, and here you are. And Southern Oregon has a lot of opportunity for the environmental sciences. But we're here to talk about soil and water. What does Jackson Soil and Water Conservation do?
So I think our title says a lot, right? We're the Soil and Water Conservation District. So our overall goals will kind of have two main focuses, right? We're going to look at your soil health, and we're going to look at water quality, and we're going to want to try to improve those with what we do here. So we have a pretty wide variety of employees here. We got myself in agriculture. We've got a riparian specialist. We've got a forestry specialist. We've got a water quality specialist, and we have a water engineer. So we have a lot of different avenues we can cover. But like I said, our focus is to make sure that, in Jackson County as a whole, that we're doing our best to help landowners improve water quality, not only for their own properties, but for the county as a whole. And, there's a lot of different factors going to that. But like I said, focusing on soil health and, this time of year with all the mud that gets created with all this rain can be a real big factor in how we do our job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we jokingly have the working title of this episode called Mud and Manure, which if you're from Southern Oregon, you will think that's funny because it's true this time of year. So the landowners don't always know that these services are available. So if a property owner had some questions, what is the actual process for getting in touch with you guys? And what kind of questions do you get?
We get a lot of questions. The process is, you give us a phone call, reach out by email. We've got a great website that has a lot of information on there. It's very detailed about the services we offer. But one of the main things we do when when a landowner gets a hold of us is we'll set up a site visit. We'll kind of talk to them over phone or via email about what their resource concerns might be. And then, one or two or three of us might come out to your property and have a walk and have a conversation
Oh,
and see
how
what's going on.
fun. You
And
guys go out
kind
in
of,
person.
yeah, kind of see how we can best help, either with advice or through granting programs or whatever we might have available at the time to help alleviate your resource problems.
So what's a common question that you would get from a property owner?
Me personally, kind of given the time of year too, I get a lot of questions from folks asking, all right, I've got a pasture. I don't think it's doing very well. What should I do to improve this pasture? Or, I've got my cows, or I think they're spending too much time in this part of my field. What do I need to do to improve them? How should I move them around? How should I get them away from our water sources to kind of keep those clean? So, there's a large variety, and like I said, with all the different expertise we have, those questions really range a lot broader than what I experience myself. But that's what I've been getting coming in the door a lot right now.
Mm-hmm. And we have a pretty wide variety of terrain here in Southern Oregon. So you guys must have to stay on your toes with all the different types.
Oh yeah, it keeps us very busy trying to navigate the different environments we have here in the county.
Now, are there different kinds of problems with different kinds of livestock?
Yes and no. Some problems are common across all livestock types, right? If you have too many animals for the area you have, you're probably going to have a lot of the same problems, right? You're going to have too many animals pushed into one area. So you're going to get a lot of overgrazing problems. You're going to get a lot of bare ground, a lot of bare exposed ground issues, which can lead to a lot of mud and manure problems this time of year. But yeah, sometimes it's all about not necessarily putting the animal you like on the property you have, but if you want to have animals, it's putting the right animal on the property that you have. So it can be gearing. I mean, I think one of the metrics I've used for a long time, if we talk about a dryland pasture, right? That's pasture that only receives moisture from rain or snow. So
So it's
there's no
not
irrigation water on
irrigated.
it. So not irrigated at all.
Okay.
Um, on average, in the Western United States, it takes 20 acres to feed one horse on a dryland pasture. If
Really?
you just had them graze that pasture without any supplemental feeding.
Wow.
So how often do we see people with, 3 horses on 60 acres? That doesn't happen, right? And so we have ways to combat that, right? We can feed animals, we can supplement them with hay or grains or anything like that. But also we need to think about how those animals move on your property to make sure A, your animals stay healthy, and more importantly, that your property stays healthy as well too.
So besides bare ground, what are some of the other signals that the land gives off to you or to the homeowner? I mean, what are some other things that folks can look for in their land that says there might be something wrong?
Oh yeah, sure. A couple of key things you might see. If you're either have spent a little time on your property, you might notice a shift in the vegetation type. So you may have had a pasture that was, nice and lush with grass,
Mm-hmm.
but if that gets used over time, you're going to see a shift from, more grass to more what we might consider as weedy vegetation. So less desirable vegetation. And you might start to see uneven use as well too. So animals are just like us. There's grasses, there's plants that they prefer to eat way more, just like there's foods we prefer to eat way more, right? So if they're in a situation where they have free reign over everything, they're going to go and they're going to pick and choose what they want to eat first, and then they might come back to things that they are less palatable down the line. But what can happen oftentimes is that they'll go and eat those plants they like, might go away from for a day or two, then they're going to come back to those plants because they're going to get a little bit of regrowth when the water's right. They're going to keep hitting on those plants and keep eating those plants, and the less desirable ones are going to grow up and become more prevalent, and then they start to take over, right? So the plants you don't want there are going to start to move in. The plants your animals don't want, they start to move in more, and that kind of just starts that cycle of your property going the wrong direction.
So in your experience, do landowners pay that much attention to the movement of the animals back and forth across the acreage? Is that something
Yes,
for the most part people are watching, or are they just putting the animals out there and then coming back in a couple of days?
I think there's a lot of both going on. I think there's people who are very, very aware of what their animals are doing. And I think you see this more in, we'll say, the traditional farmer rancher who they're trying to make a profit off their land. They're probably going to be a lot more invested
Mm-hmm.
in what's going on, the production of their property, than just the typical, horse owner who has a horse, as a companion pet. They ride every once in a while. They're maybe
Mm-hmm.
not looking at the same way as they are. So I think it really depends on land uses is where we see more people are focused on that than they aren't. But I've met plenty of retired, have on 5 acres, and they manage their land better than any farmer I've ever seen. So I'm not just going to throw this under the bus. I've seen some people with some very well managed properties out here. So it goes both ways on that one for sure.
Yeah. Well, as a real estate person, I don't know that I have any rural property owners with large animals that do not have irrigated. Most everybody, if they're going
Mhm.
to do some kind of animals or serious farming, it's all irrigated.
Yeah, I mean that's the big key right there. You're gonna if you're gonna do this and try to make any sort of profit um, off your land, you're gonna want to go with the irrigated route. It's gonna be a pretty
Mm-hmm.
tough sledding if you're trying to farm on dry land. Even with the amount of moisture we get here, compared to other parts of the world, it's still with how hot and dry we get in the summer. It's really gonna slow things down pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah, we're going to talk about that too. We're talking to Josh Bilbao of the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation. And in the few minutes we have left, I did have a question about waterfront farmland, because we do have a lot of waterways going through our farmlands. Is there a downside to the animals actually going down to the creek or the river? Is that problematic at all?
And that's all going to depend on how much time they spend down there. A lot of times, with water rights, there can be what we call stock water rights,
Oh,
through
and is
through an
that
irrigation
different?
right.
I'm sorry, I didn't
So
mean to
it's
interrupt, but
no, it's fine. It is. So a stock water right is basically water you can use to let your animals drink water, right? And oftentimes we see that water is either pumped or somehow conveyed into a trough system. Then they
Uh-huh.
drink out of that. But it also can be that those animals can access streams or canals to have their animals drink directly out of.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is not a regular everyday, multiple hours a day situation, then that's the harm is much less. But where we see problems is that animals that spend a significant amount of time in or near streams, ponds, anything like that, we start to see those nutrients added into those waters that we don't want to see in there, right? We have, obviously the main one is manure, right? You see manure get into the streams.
Oh, they're
That can def
introducing it. I see.
they're introduced into the streams that's flowing down the stream, right? And that can pollute all the way down the stream, right? As many users down the system go. So, we're not regulatory, so we don't tell people what they can and can't do. We just offer suggestions, but we definitely try to encourage folks to move their water sources out directly out of the stream and
Mm-hmm.
try to have them water from another source if
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people don't know that. We're going to have to take a quick break and say thank you to our sponsors. We're gratefully brought to you by John L. Scott, Ashland, and Medford, our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Guy Giles Mutual Mortgage. We're going to be right back talking to Josh of Jackson Soil and Water Conservation. We got more in our mud and manure episode, so don't go away. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here at John L. Scott Real Estate in Southern Oregon, having a very interesting conversation with Josh Bilbao. He's an agricultural conservationist with Jackson Soil and Water Conservation. And he was nice enough to come on and talk to us about mud and manure since it's fall. Sorry. I jokingly say I'm really 8 years old inside. So the idea of animals getting down to the creek, stock water rights, I don't know that people know about that stock
Yeah, so
water
it's
right.
yeah, so it's typical. I mean, it's oftentimes it's all included as one. If you have irrigation rights, there's going to be stock water rights in that as well too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
another on that stock water right issue, you can actually have wells on your property as well too that are dedicated for stock water. So you can drill a well that you can then pump out of into a tank for your water as well too. So it's
Okay.
much different than your domestic well and what you can use that water for, right? But there are ways out there that you can get water to your stock other than having them, like we talked about, going directly to the stream. But that those water rights have been there for close to 200 years now. They said that for that long. It's gonna take
Mm-hmm.
a lot to change those. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So has the riparian areas that are abutting farmland over time, like, you mentioned 200 years of irrigation rights, but over the last few decades, do we have any kind of chronic deterioration of the water to land connections, or are they pretty well managed, would you
Yeah,
say?
I think there's areas where we see what we'll call it erosion, from
Erosion, thank you.
in any situation where you have a constant line of traffic going into one spot, you're going to start to see banks, destabilize. Vegetation's
Mm-hmm.
going to be gone because that's where they're accessing the stream. So yeah, that definitely happens. Um, I don't think it's all that prevalent. I think it's pretty well managed for the most part in this spot. There are definitely areas where there could be better work. There could be different management strategies that go on different properties. But I think for the most part, it's pretty well documented. And I think one thing we see a lot with our work, especially in the riparian area, is um, you know the prevalence of the Himalayan blackberry that grows in the riparian corridors. They almost act as a fence sometimes, and they almost
Right.
keep animals out of streams. Now, from a riparian health standpoint, that's not the greatest thing I have down there too, but that's one way that the stream has kind of in essence defended itself, is allowing those
Oh,
blackberries to
that's
grow there
interesting.
and kind of
Yeah.
pushing, if cattle or horses or whatever have access, kind of push them to a single like entry point.
Uh-huh. So what's the problem with the Himalayan blackberry for the stream
So
health?
so there's a couple different issues with that. Obviously it's a non-native plant, so it's displacing native plants that would normally be growing in those riparian areas. If we think about the riparian buffers, we'll call them, the areas just outside of a stream where we have vegetation growing. Um, those really act almost as a sponge or a filter for any water that's going to go into the stream. Right. So if you
Ah,
have that strata of, smaller, sedges and grasses into shrubs, into trees that are going to be along a riparian area, they're going to filter that water that's going to drain into the stream and in essence help, put cleaner water back into the stream. Whereas the blackberry itself is kind of made, just a single a single vegetation stream there. They're not going to filter nearly as much as a traditional riparian area would. So that's going to have a disadvantage to water quality. But also, I think we've seen too in 2020 they are quite flammable as well too. So they pose quite a fire risk with how
wow.
they grow and how quickly they grow as well.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. That is super interesting. So it seems that generally speaking, the homeowner, the private citizens uh do take really good care. We don't have a lot of incidences of overuse and abuse of that, especially that riparian buffer. That most of the private landowners are doing a good job of that. Is that your experience?
Yeah, so far that's been my experience. I think I've seen much more folks that are doing a good job of that than aren't.
Mhm.
It's still a problem, and there's still issues where it can be better, like I said. But no, I think for the most part, what I've seen so far,
Mhm.
it's in a good place.
So if you have a someone who's brand new to rural property ownership and they just bought land on a waterway
Mhm.
and they have these visions of goats and sheep and horses and all that, what would you advise them if they're brand new to this whole idea of taking care of the land and taking care of the water and they want animals
Sure. Yep.
and they've
No,
never done it before?
that is a
We
very
have a
very
lot of
likely
that.
scenario that we have dealt with before and will continue to deal with. Absolutely. I guess to start with animals in the waterways, what we try to encourage is keep your animals out of the water as much as you can. If you have a water right where you can pump out of the stream into a tank, that's the best. Um, if you absolutely have to have your only possible way to water your animals is to give them access to the water. There are ways where you can create a stream access and you can harden that area, right? So you can add rock, you can add what's called a geotextile or a geogrid kind of to the banks, to the area. You can kind of put some more gravel on the bottom there and then kind of fence it, kind of fence them into one spot so they can access the water there and they only access the water in one spot
Oh, okay. So they're
rather than
not going on the soil and the plants.
rather than having access to the whole stream area that they're able to. So yeah, you can
Uh-huh.
there's strategies that you can make it healthy to have your animals access a
Hmm.
streamway.
And is that something you guys do you give them a plan? Like who decides what kind of rock and where to put it and all that?
Sure. So part of our what we call technical assistance, it can lead to what we call a conservation plan, where we start to help a landowner plan how they're going to remedy their resource issues. So
Oh,
yes,
that's
that is
cool.
it's definitely possible to work with us and help you develop a plan as to how you can mitigate an issue like that or help you design an issue like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, it's so site dependent about how much or how little
Sure.
advice it's wanted or how much we give. But yeah, that's definitely a possibility to create a plan to help folks.
So are you allowed to do any hardening in conjunction with a conservation plan for human use? Or is it pretty much just for um animals?
So yeah, you can. I mean, there are definitely property owners who own on both sides of the stream, and
Mm-hmm.
they have hardened crossings, so to speak. So it's a crossing across the stream where they might drive a vehicle over, or a tractor, or push
Oh,
their animals
okay.
over. So yeah, so you
Okay.
can harden all the way across. Absolutely, that's definitely an option.
Okay.
I just will just before people throw out there and start, we're doing that work. Any work you do in and around a stream is going to require a permitting process. So before you go doing any modification, make sure that you've talked to the right people, and which obviously we would help you if you talk to us about that,
Mm-hmm.
but send you to the right people to get the proper permits before you can do any actual work in and around the stream area.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yes, you can definitely have hardened crossings for for human use as well too.
And then does the state of Oregon get involved in any of that since Oregon owns the water?
Yeah, so
A
that's
lot
what
of
your
people don't
permits are
know
going to come
that,
from.
huh?
Yeah, so yeah, but all the water, yeah, it's all belongs to the state, right? Any water that flows in the stream belongs to the state of Oregon. So yeah, so any permitting you do would have to be through the state. Absolutely. That's where your stop would be to work with them on what you can and what you can't do.
Well, I'm really intrigued about conservation plans. I think we could probably have you back and do a whole show just on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like I said. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, yeah, it's one way that we can really help and give back and put people in the right direction to give them, the expertise advice that we have in this office to help them make the best property that they can.
And is that something that becomes attached to the property or is that kind of separate and voluntary and
Like I said, that's going to be a voluntary action. Typically when we do conservation planning, it's usually tied to some granting program where there's going to be some exchange of money. So yeah, a lot of times there's a little more um, stringent work on our point, especially when it comes to the planning part. But there doesn't have to be money involved. We can help you develop a plan, even if there's not granting funds available for folks. We can still help work with you on planning to improve your property.
Oh, and we're gonna talk about the grants in just a little bit because that's very intriguing as well. But going back to the mud and manure, sorry,
Yes.
such a funny title. So here the rains have just barely started. What do landowners need to watch for? What are some of the things that they can do? This fall, what are some of the fall chores, for example, to help shore things up for the winter?
Sure. And a lot of times, like we had mentioned before, when you have mud issues, so to speak, it's usually associated with heavy use or livestock, animal use areas. So it's high traffic site, it's animal activity, it's maybe off the edge of a barn or edge of an outbuilding, where you kind of see that. So, a couple of things you can do to kind of help start to manage mud problems. Let's start if you have an outbuilding or a barn and you have, the water, when it rains, it drifts right off the edge of your barn, right next to your barn, right? And then you have standing water there. A really easy way to mitigate that is put a gutter system on your barn. So you can take that water and you can
Oh,
divert
that's a
it,
brilliant idea.
move it off somewhere where it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to sit and potentially rot the foundation of your barn, maybe rot the posts that are associated with that. You can also, instead of just pushing off your property, you can actually catch that water. Any water that falls on top of a structure like that, a roof, you can catch and you can store that and you can use that as you please. You don't have to have a water right for that. Rainwater is actually harvest is legal in Oregon. So you can, with a proper system, once again, needs
It
to be
is or
permitted as
is
well.
not legal? I'm
It
sorry.
is legal.
It
It
is
is legal
legal.
to catch. Yep.
Water collection is legal. Okay.
Yep. So you can, we talked about that dryland situation. You could catch that rainwater and you could use that water. You could use it to water your livestock. You could use it to water a garden. You could use it for whatever you might want to use it for, but it is legal to catch that water and use it. And like I said, storing that water is a great way to take it off of an exposed mud and, really reduce your mud in a spot like that.
Well, and then you're controlling
exactly.
the water. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
So
you
are
can also
there,
use,
oh, go ahead.
as I say, you can use different drainages too. You can, if collecting water isn't what you want to do, you can put drains in areas where water might sit. That can be a French drain, it can be a drain tile that's going to take that water from where it's sitting. It's going to push it somewhere else. Maybe, obviously, we know all water is going to want to drain to a waterway, right? But sometimes if we have water that's associated with a heavy use area that can be associated with animal use, we want to make sure that water is clean though before it goes into a waterway. So we can use what's called a bioswale. So you can kind of divert your water into like almost a little indent in the ground. And like I said, you put that riparian, that vegetative buffer around that, and that water can slowly filter back into the stream after it
A
sits in the
bioswale. I can't wait to
bioswale.
dive
Yep.
into that. And I've also got some questions about pH.
Okay.
And if that's a big deal, we're talking to Josh Bilbao. He's an agricultural conservationist at Jackson Soil and Water Conservation. Super excited to have you, Josh. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. Well, hey, folks, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. We're going to be finishing up talking to Josh Bilbao, agricultural conservationist with Jackson Soil and Water. And we were, right before the break, we were talking about bioswale. So what is a swale?
So a bioswale is just kind of a fancy term for kind of digging a little impression in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind the bioswale is it catches water for a momentary. It's not a permanent. It's not a pond. It's not something you're going to take that water out of. Basically, it's just kind of a kind of a small. I don't even want to say dam because that's even kind of more misleading. But it's just a way to kind of stop water and help it kind of not flow as fast as it can to the stream, right? So the
So
idea
you can
behind
slow it down on its way to the creek or something.
Yeah, so if there's potential contaminants in that water, it's a great way to be able to slow it down, kind of stop that water for a moment, let it kind of filter through. Hopefully, you can, like I said, encourage a vegetative buffer around that bioswale to kind of help filter that water through its roots, and then that water can slowly trickle its way back to the stream. It's a great advantage for water quality and for soil health too. If you can kind of get those nutrients to stay in the soil, become available to plants as well, then too, then it's a win-win for everybody.
How deep are those usually?
Not very deep. I mean,
Like
I
just
wouldn't say more. Yeah, a foot. I think you're about to say a foot. I mean, that's probably about it. It's going to depend on, they can be, 3 feet by foot, 1 foot. They can be 50 feet by 1 foot. I mean, it just
mm-hmm,
depends on the amount of water you're trying to slow down
mm-hmm.
before it reaches a stream.
So in the earlier example where we have waterfront pastures with animals,
Mhm.
then usually there's some elevation, and so then the manure is during the rainy season getting washed basically into the waterway. So would you
Yes,
put this like all the way across your riparian?
that's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a situation where you've got a little more elevation, a little more slope to a potential pasture, where it's not so easy to potentially either harrow in that manure or somehow collect that manure and store it somewhere else. Yeah, that could be a good option to have a swale there before you get to your stream, to kind of help stop some of that manure and those extra nutrient additives to get into the water. Like I said, it's not an end all solution, but it's definitely something that can help from a water quality standpoint.
Mm-hmm. How big of a problem is the potential pollution from animal? Is it animal organic? Is that the polite term?
Sure, if we want to be politically correct, sure, organic inputs from animals into the stream, right? The biggest thing you're going to see that's going to come out of manure into the stream, is going to be an increase in ecoli levels. Bacteria like that. I think everybody probably has heard of ecoli before and what that can do to,
Mm-hmm.
to a person who ingests ecoli. That's one of the bigger things you'll see. But I mean, sometimes you never know what could be in manure. There could be nitrogen inputs into the stream. It could be phosphorus inputs into the stream, which those can have detrimental effects to the aquatic vertebrates or invertebrates that are in streams as well too. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different factors to think about the inputs that go into stream and how we can do our best to minimize those effects.
Yeah. Well, some of the pastures are so large and the animals are roaming kind of free range to some extent. I don't know, how would you collect manure otherwise? I mean, I think you really do need one of these kind of systems if you're on a waterway, because otherwise what would the farmer or the rancher do?
So you got to kind of think about the scale of a property. If you're talking about something that get to 50 to 100 plus acres, the best way to kind of manage manure in that standpoint, if you have a substantial amount of livestock, is you can harrow that manure in. So you don't want to do it when the ground's too wet. You want to do it when it's a little more dry. You don't want to make a sloppy, muddy mess out there. But a harrow is basically it's a large, heavy screen that you would pull behind a tractor. And basically what it does is you kind of go over your field and it can break up that manure. Um,
Oh, I
and
see.
so it makes that manure much more easily absorbed into the soil itself and not necessarily flowing into the stream. It's like I said, it's not a perfect science. It's still going to get in there potentially, but it's one solution to kind of make that manure stay. Because the manure itself is a great additive to the soil, right? It's nutrients for the soil, it's nutrients for the vegetation. So
True.
it's good to have on there. But like I said, it can become problematic if there's too much in one spot. So kind of trying to devise methods to reduce that or remove it.
How common of a practice is that harrowing, where you're dragging something behind your tractor and working the manure into the larger pastures?
It's a fairly common practice. It's like I said, it's a quick way to really to help spread that manure around really too. It's granted if you have a good grazing management practice, you're spreading that manure around anyway. And that manure should begin spread around. But if you have spots where animals are concentrating more than they're not, that can be a practice to really help spread that manure around more to get a more beneficial use from it and not make it such a big problem.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating science. For the more forested parcels, in the few minutes we have left, gosh, we have so many things to talk about. I'm not sure we're going to get to them, but just briefly, is there anything about forested land that owners should know about? Special care?
Yeah, so I mean that's going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more difficult from a manure management standpoint. If you have grazing pasture that's next to a forest or forested pasture that's next to a stream, the harrow possibility is probably not going to be an option. You're going to have to be very careful with how you graze your animals in and around the stream. So I mean that might be a situation where there's more of a buffer. Maybe you fence off the stream in spots so you keep animals away from the stream, so you're not having so much manure potentially making its way into the stream that way.
Yeah,
So,
because it would be a lot more work for you, wouldn't it?
oh yes, absolutely.
So I'm sorry we're running out of time. And we did want to touch on the grant programs because that's something not everybody knows about.
Yeah, so we have a lot of granting opportunities that come through our office. We occasionally, like I said, they kind of come and go. We occasionally have small granting programs that we can use that we personally have out of our office. But we also partner with a lot of different agencies. We partner with NRCS, with OWEB, with Oregon Department of Forestry, Oregon Department of Agriculture. They'll often have grants that are available to homeowners. They're typically cost share grants, right? So it's going to require some amount of financial input from the homeowner. But like I said, it's oftentimes they can create fantastic outcomes if done correctly. So we often work with many people on different granting opportunities like that. So it's hard to just say, yep, there's one there. It's you can call us one week and it's a different opportunity than it is the next week. We're constantly working on different opportunities that way.
Well, and Oregon's really good about that. They don't just make it all on the shoulders of the homeowners.
Yeah, no, it's really nice for all the homeowners to have that. I mean, like I said, even if it's only a 50% match, it could be a good chunk and really make a project, push it over the edge to get it done rather than have all that cost burden be on the homeowner itself.
Well, Josh, this has been great. What's the website address and what's a good phone number? We got 30 seconds.
So our website address is
Trick question.
www.jswcd.org. And then our phone number is 541-423-6159.
Awesome. Well, you have just been so informative and fun to talk to. Will you come back again?
Oh, absolutely.
Great. We'd love to have you. Thanks so much. This broadcast will air again on KCMX FM 99.5 tomorrow, Sunday at 6 o'clock. Have a great Southern Oregon weekend. We'll see you next time. Bye now.